Well, hello.
Hello.
My name's Leanna, and I'm a grateful recovering addict.
Do we clap? Do we snap?
Snap, clap, hug, whatever you want to.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so on today's episode, we are talking about substance use or substance abuse, whatever term you prefer.
It's hard to start with use and not end up in abuse, so.
Oh, that's a good one. Clever. Yes. So, I nerd out on this kind of stuff. I am, like I said, I'm a recovering addict, but I also went to school for a very long time to become a substance use counselor or a substance abuse counselor. Never did that because now I'm in social work, but it's still all in the same. Anyways.
You still have all the knowledge in your brain.
I do. That's what I'm going to share with them today.
You're going to drop the knowledge on us. So get us started by telling us all the nerdy things about how substances affect our brain.
Okay, so I could probably
talk about this all day.
Yeah, but I'm going to break it down pretty simply. So, substances. When you use...
Wait, first, what do we mean by substances for the audience?
Okay, so anything that's harmful to your body that can... So this is how I describe addiction in the best way. If you're using a substance like alcohol, drugs, stimulants, whatever, if you're using something for its non-intended purpose, which we can go into.
So it could be sex or food or something like that too.
That affects your daily living. That's kind of how I describe addiction.
When it's getting in the way of you living a good life.
Yeah, when it's making your life hard. So that's the way I describe addiction. Just misusing something and it's not benefiting your life and it's making your life worse. So to get into the brain part of it all, what they do when you use substances like alcohol, drugs, anything like that, it changes the chemicals in your brain. So like your dopamine, your serotonin, things like that. It changes those, it alters that and creates an imbalancement. So let's talk about my drug of choice, which was methamphetamine. As well as like shopping and all that, but we won't get into that.
We're still recovering from that.
We're still recovering. Okay, so let's talk about a person who uses like methamphetamine. What it does is you use it so often that it starts acting as the chemicals dopamine and serotonin. So when you use for a period of time, a long period of time consistently, your brain stops producing those chemicals.
Yeah, it says you're getting this from somewhere else, so I don't have to work that hard, and I'll just turn that little knob off.
Yes. So if you use for a long period of time and then stop using, your brain doesn't know to just kick back into gear. Your brain goes, what the hell is going on?
Fun fact, antidepressants do the same thing. So when you're coming off of antidepressants, that's why it can be very difficult to do that without the help of a doctor.
Yes. So your brain doesn't know to continue to produce those chemicals. So that's why people have, the coming down you hear about. Those really bad crashes, like heroin addicts, they get physically sick. Alcoholics get physically, anybody who uses substances is going to get physically ill, as well as, depressed, anxious, and all of that, because your brain is imbalanced. The chemicals are imbalanced.
Would you say the physical stuff is the hardest part, or would you say the mental stuff is the hardest part when you're coming down off of substances or trying to work through addiction? Like if you're trying to take step away from that, do you think it's the psychological part where your brain is telling you, I need this, I need this, I need this? Or do you think it's the feeling like crap and you just really feeling like you're dying part?
It's probably the brain part. It's really the brain part because, the brain part triggers the physical part, because we all know how our brains work, right? That's the epicenter of our whole being. And then like my brain's going to tell me to wave to you, that kind of thing. So when your brain is saying you don't have enough chemicals in your body to produce normal dopamine and serotonin, then your body starts feeling physically ill. It's like a whole system that works together. So it's kind of
the whole thing
both.
shuts down.
It's kind of both, I guess, if I'm going to answer the question. But definitely starts in the brain. So, with that being said, I believe in the disease model of addiction.
Tell me what that means. What's
So-
the disease model?
The disease model is that when you use substances for a long period of time, it's basically just what I described. When you use substances for long periods of time, the addict becomes reliant on those substances because of it's producing the chemicals in your brain, as per a normal person. So when you use a long period of time, you need that. You're relying on that. And so it creates, like, people are going to get controversial with this one, so no negative comments, but it's almost like when a diabetic needs
Insulin.
insulin. I was going to say diabetic medication, but insulin. When you don't have that insulin, that person with diabetes crashes. So that's why the theory is the disease model, because it acts in the same way. Now, I do understand addiction is a choice. So don't come at me. Don't come at me in the comments. But that's why the theory is a disease model.
I both agree and disagree with the disease.
Okay.
And let me tell you why I agree first.
Okay.
Okay. Sometimes diabetes is a disease that you caused yourself.
True. Yep.
By not taking
Sometimes.
care of your life and eating poorly. Sometimes autoimmune diseases. And that's going to be taboo also. People are going to be like, I didn't cause my autoimmune disease. Do you have breast implants? Maybe you did sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are things that you can have going on in your own body. And of course, a lot of times we don't know this because even our doctors don't know this.
Right.
It's not stuff that's taught in medical school. But we can sometimes be the cause of our own diseases.
Okay.
But on the flip side, why I don't want to call it a disease is I think the real issue is not the substance. I think the substance is the Band-Aid. The
Okay.
disease is what it is that's going on in your brain that makes you want to do the drugs or the substances in the first place.
And I agree with both of those too, actually. So, it turns into a disease, right? Like that you're creating on your own. But I do believe that people suffering from mental health issues, trauma, triggers, those kind of things, develop substance use to cope. So it is a coping skill for trauma and
I think
those kind of things.
Even to summarize it in a broader way, like, I think people are trying to escape their bodies. They're not comfortable in their skin, and they have found whatever substance, distraction that they like, whether that's sex, whether that's food, whether that's weed, whether that's alcohol, methamphetamines, heroin, whatever it is, to make them not have to feel what's going on in here.
Or in here.
Or both.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I can just escape workaholism. Like,
yeah.
That's an addiction too. It's widely accepted.
Right.
Because that just means you work hard and you're making money, you're hustling. But when you're doing that so that you don't have to be at home or you don't have to sit with yourself.
When it's affecting your daily life.
Yeah. If you can't sit still and you're using it as a distraction. It's not healthy.
Right. So it's not just about substance abuse or substances. It's any type of addiction that's used as a coping skill to deal with what's happening up here and in here. So I do believe that too. So it's kind of like disease model and mental health. It is. We actually, fun fact, just a little quick nerdy little fact. The DSM-5 was made, I think, in the early 2000s, I want to say.
I don't know what that is.
Sorry. It is a book that counselors and psychologists
I do know what that is.
And it's got all the diagnoses for mental health issues. So I think the DSM-5 came out in the early 2000s. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But it's been a while since I've been in school, okay? But that was the first issue that substance abuse was actually a mental health disorder.
Circling back to the disease thing, diseases can be passed down through generations. addictions can be passed down through generations.
Yeah.
But I would also say that sometimes you're not passing down the disease, you're passing down your inability to cope and be in your own skin. You don't have the tools to do that, so how could you possibly teach the future
somebody
generations?
else. Right. Yeah, that's true. So also in like the addiction world, I guess you have like 4 types of things. You have emotional, social, environmental, and there's one more that I can't remember.
Are these reasons that you
So
have the
no,
addictions?
these they're not reasons, but they're factors
that
of
play
addiction.
into it?
Yes.
So like sometimes it starts out as a social thing, like most of the time that's how drinking starts, like I want to be social.
Mm-hmm.
And then environmental, is that like where you live, your house?
Yeah, like how you grew up, like the area that you grew up in, the culture that you grew up in. Like in some cultures, it's perfectly acceptable to start drinking at like 10 years old, you know? And if you have any sort of mental health or trauma, it could turn into an addiction. I'm not going to say it will, but, you know, like both of us, we grew up with parents who were alcoholics.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, addiction has touched both our lives at some point in time. So,
yeah,
you know, like, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but.
I mean, I think I've touched on it before in a couple other podcasts, but
same.
Both my parents, severe alcoholics, like booze for breakfast, both died before they got to get old, which, that in itself is really sad. You know what I mean? Like, if you're the person that has the addiction, you think of it sometimes as like, well, I'm ruining my life, but you're not just ruining your life. There are people around you that care about you, and you are definitely affecting their lives. And if doing it for yourself is not a good reason to start working through some of that, do it for the people whose lives you are affecting, whether you want to or not, whether you're trying to or not.
Yeah. Man, you just put me into a really deep thought right there.
I almost made myself cry.
It's okay. I know. I probably gonna scroll back to the tape and see my deep thought face going on. That should be the clip we use.
Just Leanna going deep down into her
deep
soul.
Deep down in my soul. Yeah, because what I was thinking is when you were saying, you know, if you don't do it, you know, if not doing it for yourself, do it for your loved ones or, you know, somebody who you're affecting. I just was thinking, like, when I first got clean, the only time that it ever stuck was when I decided that I needed to do this for myself.
Yeah, and that is the only way to make lasting change. Like, I'm not telling you, like, oh, make these other people your reason for doing this. Like, your reason for doing it, it can start with somebody else, like seeing how you're affecting other people's lives. But if you're not doing it for yourself, it'll never last. Like, and that's, everybody has their own journey with that. And some people do not win that journey. And I don't say that to be depressing, but like, my parents did not have the tools. They tried a couple times, but they just did not have the tools to work through that. And their whole environment was alcoholics, and they didn't know how to not be that.
So do you mind if I dissect that situation a little bit? Are you comfortable with that?
Okay. Go for it.
So did your mom or dad ever experience trauma in their childhood growing up?
My dad didn't really talk about his childhood, but I know his brother died when he was 19 in a motorcycle accident. His dad, I'm assuming, wasn't a great human since he sexually assaulted me when I was a child. And he was in the Army for a little while. So my dad probably had some traumas that he just did not address for sure. And I think my dad was probably maybe bipolar, maybe manic depressive, something along those lines.
Yeah, just never
it's very
diagnosed.
up, down.
Okay. Would go through really high highs and really low lows. Yeah.
And my mom for sure had trauma. Her mom left when she was 2. She had an alcoholic father who was abusive. She mentioned several times that her and her sister had been maybe sexually assaulted, maybe raped. She didn't really go into detail about that stuff, but at a young age. And she definitely had a lot of traumas. And in that generation, there was no like there was no like social media, let's all talk about this has happened to us.
Mhm.
There was no moral support. Counseling wasn't even like a thing that was thought to be a good thing. It was like,
Right.
oh, only crazy people go see therapists.
Well, just only recently, and I think like our listeners can contest to this, like only recently did we become comfortable as a society to talk about mental health,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And our traumas and all
Yeah.
of the things that everybody has been like. There was a point in time when people thought this is going to be gross, but people thought incest was really rare.
Mhm.
Like sexual assault by a relative, really rare. They're like, oh, that rarely happens. As people started talking about it more, they started to realize how really ridiculously common it is.
Well, so me working in child welfare, I can contest to that because most of our, child victims, I would say, I mean, I don't know the percentage, but it's pretty freaking high up there. I'd say more than 50. I could bet on that. That the victims their perpetrators are somebody in their family, if not their parent.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyways, so trauma, I just wanted to ask that because it's like I wanted to get the listeners thinking, and then I was thinking myself about like how, my addiction stemmed from trauma, and I didn't have a hard life. Like, it's weird because you and I sit here today, I could say you've never had an addiction, right?
I think food was my addiction for a
Yeah.
little while.
Yeah, you've talked about that
I
too.
definitely self-soothed with food, or like
Mhm.
tried to numb out or like raise my endorphins with
Mhm.
food,
Mhm.
or like tried to have extra padding on the outside of my body so as not to attract male attention.
Yeah.
So in a way, food was my addiction, but I didn't have an addiction like a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction
Yeah.
because I saw it so clearly with my parents that I so very clearly did not want to do anything that they were doing.
I'm so happy you say that because I'm sitting here thinking I'm doing like a compare contrast kind of thing because I think this is good to talk about because me and you had very different lives growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So just a little bit of my background, like even though my father, I grew up with my dad being an alcoholic, he still worked every single day. He provided for the family. He gave me the greatest life I could. Like, we went on vacations, like it was perfectly normal. What do they call that? Somebody who can like work and carry on life.
A functioning
alcoholic. Thank you. So, or functioning addict or whatever. But there was a lot of turmoil with that as well, and I think that was like my trauma, was just like the consistent turmoil with watching him battle this disease. And then also I love my parents. I'm not digging on you guys. You do the best you can with what you have, right?
Mm-hmm. You only know what you know.
Right. So give yourself some grace, Mom, if you're listening.
Hi, Mom.
But I feel like a lot of the things that my dad was going through weren't talked about. Like, things just weren't talked about. They were just viewed.
Well, and at that generation, like, you don't talk about those things.
Right. You just don't.
Like, that was the normal, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it was weird if you did talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Well,
that's not something people do.
We're kind of looping around, so, because we were saying that earlier. But, so it just really wasn't talked about, like, the ins and outs and, the hard stuff wasn't really discussed in depth.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember some conversations like during my addiction where my parents would say, this is bad for you, you need to quit,
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, I was so far gone that, like, I just couldn't stop like that,
Yeah.
because you needed that. But, yeah, so it's very interesting how, I had this full-blown addiction with a semi-decent life, and then...
Well, and that's one thing, too. Like, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
So, like, my partner, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me sharing this, he was raised in an LDS family. Very good people, very kind people, very loving people. Like, he had the best childhood, vacations. Anything he wanted was provided. Like, honestly, he was a little bit spoiled. Like, he was very blessed.
Yeah.
But because and this isn't to shame them either. Like, it's not like their fault that this happened. This is just proof that it can happen to anybody.
Yes.
They didn't discuss these things because this is not something they wanted their kids to even know about.
Right.
Like, I don't want my kids to know about drugs because I don't want them to do drugs.
Right.
And I get that mentality.
I do too.
But in
As a
his
parent.
mind, because he didn't know about these things, he was curious about them.
Yeah. I guess I was curious too.
And so he became a full-blown addict.
Yeah.
Meth, heroin, pills, weed, all of it. And was way down the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
So he came from that background. You came from your background. I came from my background. And anybody, and I, listen, people that come from my background where they have alcoholic parents, very easy to become an alcoholic.
Very.
Not because you don't know, like you don't have the example of what is going to happen.
Right.
But because it's a normal feeling in your body.
Well, and
in
it's
your
biological.
life.
That's the fourth one. Biological.
See, and I don't necessarily agree that it's biological. This is the one thing that we'll probably disagree on.
Okay.
But in the same way, like I do agree, like how I said earlier, that I think it's the habits you pass on. Like the traumas and the things that you haven't dealt with, you pass those on to your kids.
So it's more like environmental and societal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
it can happen to anybody.
It can. It really can.
You can be the best parent and have a child that ends up addicted to something.
Right. And you know, who knows the course of your life and what's going to happen. I just think the best thing to do if you're addicted, because we're talking about addiction, is to seek help for that. However, by whatever means necessary. You know, like you with the food stuff, me with drugs and alcohol, or drugs, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We both are working on that, even to this day, still.
Yeah, I still want to gorge on some cupcakes once in a while.
Oh, I love me some cupcakes.
I don't eat cupcakes anymore, but...
So, yeah, I just think that, you know, some of the ways that I guess I could say that I helped my addiction was, I want to tell you a story, okay?
Okay.
So, the day that I realized that I didn't want to be an addict anymore, or use meth anymore, was, gosh, I was hanging out with some friends, won't disclose any names, but I remember, this is pretty graphic, trigger warning, okay, for anybody. I remember shooting up for the last time in the woods in a car with friends, and I just took my kit, we called it a kit, took all my kit and just fucking chucked it as far as I could in the woods. And I had done that a couple of times before, but this time it was different because I was like, I'm fucking done, you know? Like, I cannot do this to myself anymore. Feeling like death, but also being high. Strangest feeling ever. So I just went and I curled in bed for like a day and a half. Like, that depression just sat in. And then once I got myself up, I went to the health food store.
I feel healthier just walking into a health food store. I love that you did that.
Okay, so I went because I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, I just knew that I didn't want to feel sick, and I wanted to get clean. Right? That's what I knew. I knew that I needed something different. So I walked into the health food store and I looked at the nice older lady behind the counter and I said, I am 2 days off of doing meth and heroin as well at that point in time. And I said, I need to get clean. And she, gosh, I wish I could hug that lady right now because this was like a turning point. I'm about to cry too, just kind of reliving this moment. But she looks at me and she goes, I know exactly what you need. Like, no judgment. Like, no fear.
This is making me cry.
And she walked me around the store and we picked up like 4 or 5 different bottles of everything. I remember one of them was ginseng. I think one of them was niacin. One of them was vitamin D of some sort. Magnesium maybe, I think. I don't know. They were all different kinds and I paid for them and I was like, thank you. And I did that every single day until the bottles, like did the regimen of taking them every single day until everything was gone. And I got past it. It was not pretty. Life sucked for a while. I do distinctly remember at around 6 months clean, I finally got out of the fog. And if you've been a drug addict, you know what that fog is after you get clean. I finally felt normal. Normal, you know, and I was able to get my life together. But at that point in time, I wasn't ready to deal with the problem. I took the Band-Aid off, but I wasn't ready to deal with the problem. So that didn't come till much later in my life.
I think while we're discussing this, I think it's important that, like, you touched on something really important there, that you knew it was going to suck. Like, when you're dealing with an addiction and you're going through your point in time where you're like, I'm done, you have to know it's going to suck. It's going to suck for a little while, and that is okay. But it's also really important for you to know that it's not going to suck forever. Like, you will get through this. And when you do, life will be better. And you can get through this. People get through this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
You are not alone. There are people that can help you. You know, AA, NA, doctors, counselors,
therapists,
and if
meditation.
if you're real heavy into addiction, I would caution you not to do it without the help of a doctor or a facility.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. I do have at least one friend that I can think of that tried to quit drinking and died because she was such a severe alcoholic.
Yeah.
And there are people that try to come off of drugs cold turkey, and because it's so severe, they do die. So this is a serious, serious thing. And if you are a severe addict, have somebody help you through it so that you know you're going to make it through to the other side.
Yeah.
If you're not a severe alcoholic or a severe drug addict, and what you're dealing with, I don't want to say is less, but is not of the variety that you could die, you can totally go cold turkey. Once you make up your mind, boom, go cold turkey if that's how you feel like you're going to be the most effective.
Yeah.
But there's support out there of every variety.
Yeah.
Podcasts, books, hotlines. What's the hotline?
So I was just going to look it up. So there's actually, so I learned this today because the hotline number is 988, and it is the suicide hotline, but it's a suicide and crisis lifeline for emotional and substance use 24/7. So if you call 988, you'll be able to talk to somebody who can help you through your, you know, substance use or addiction or
a real low spot where you're
really
just
low
feeling.
spot. Yeah.
Before we go further than this, I want to say, what if you have a person in your life that you care about that is dealing with substance abuse? What advice do we have for them?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Because you can't just tell them, like, oh, just make them stop doing drugs.
I have a friend, you know, who's suffered for a while from their addiction, that I'm currently, you know, friends. I would consider him a friend, but right now he's not being the healthiest, you know, and, I'm getting emotional.
It's okay. It's real.
It
Real
is.
is emotional.
It sucks. Okay, so this is my suck because I just want to. I want to be a part of his life, but I can't because he's, you know, making the choices that he's making, and I have a family and a career that I need to uphold. So, you know, I had to set a boundary. That is the piece of advice that I would tell someone who's, you know, living or I don't want to say dealing with, but, you know, someone who has an addiction close to you. Setting boundaries.
And sometimes that boundary is going to be like
not talking to them.
Yeah. And if that's a spouse, if that's a parent, like, that can be hard advice.
That's why it's hard for me to even think about right now.
Listen, you don't want an addiction in your life ruining your life. And you can't have a person that is addictive ruining your life.
Yeah. Addiction is a family-centered disease. So if, like, you're living with somebody who has an addiction, or you have somebody that's close to you with an addiction, and it's an everyday process and cycle with them, it's a family disease. It's a family. You are writing a lot, although you're not using the substances, you're writing right along with that person's addiction.
Well, and almost not to make somebody feel like it's their fault either, because it's not your fault.
No.
But there is something to be said for allowing the behavior without consequence.
Yeah, like what do they call that when you're enabling? That's the word. Yeah. When you're enabling someone, like giving them money. So this is what I would say first is sit down and talk with them. Tell them you love them, but also tell them that you can't support them in this lifestyle. So that's, I've done that several times in my life now with, people who, because I was in Narcotics Anonymous, and there would be people who would relapse, and I'd say, I'm sorry, I can't be your friend when you're in active addiction, because it's going to affect my recovery. Mm-hmm. And so I had to set that boundary for myself, as well as my family and my daughter too.
Yeah. Like if it's your kid or something, that's going to be a very difficult thing for you to do.
I hope that...
You know what? Buy them a cheeseburger. If they're hungry, you feed them. But do not give them cash.
Yeah.
Do not give them don't even give them a cell phone. They're going to sell it, and thing to use that money to buy drugs.
Well, potentially, yeah.
Probably.
I don't want addicts to feel bad for hearing this.
And I'm not trying to shame anybody either, but these are the cold hard facts.
These are cold hard facts, yeah. It is hard to hear sometimes, but yeah.
And I don't want to shame anybody that is in addiction. If you're in addiction, I recognize that is difficult.
Yes,
and it is not easy to go through that suck that you're going to have to go through, and to deal with the things that you're trying to escape from in the first place, because those are going to come up after the addiction's gone. Your
worst day sober is going to be better than your best day high. I'm just telling you. That's just how it works. That's how it works. I promise you. You probably say, no, bullshit, but yeah, I promise you. I want to circle back to one of the other things that I want to recommend is setting your bottom line with the addict in your life. So, you set them down, tell them you love them, but I can't support you in this lifestyle right now, and set kind of like a line, draw a line in the sand and say, this is what I can do. This is what I'm not willing to do. So boundary setting.
And mean it.
Mm-hmm. And mean it hard. And stick with it. Yes, because if you don't stick with it, it's like
they know they're going to be able to play you like a kid when you tell a kid,
if
you don't do this, you're going to be grounded for 2 weeks, and you don't ground them, then they know that you don't mean what you say, and they can play you.
Yeah. So,
what does recovery look like on the other side of the suck?
So in June, I will have 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24, 17 years clean off of methamphetamines and heroin.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, 17 years I'll be clean in June off of methamphetamine and heroin. So I've done so much work. Yet 17 years go by and I'm still doing the fucking work. So it doesn't end. I'll tell you that much. The work never ends.
What's the work look like now? At the beginning, the work is getting clean, detoxing, getting through the suck.
Yeah.
Long-term work looks like what?
So long-term work. So now my maintenance is staying humble. I think that's something that's really important to me. Staying humble, remember where I came from and what I had to work through. Sometimes I talk about it and I feel like I'm talking about a completely different person or a movie or something. Mm-hmm. Which is cool, and I'm like, wow, I really went through that. But yeah, so today I have to have my routine. I have to eat as well as I can. I have to exercise. I have to, drink water. I have to, I do stuff like this too. This podcast is very therapeutic for me. I think both of us have said that before. It's very therapeutic to work through this. I know when I'm triggered, and I know, I don't get the urge or itch to use. Like, I know that's never going to be an option anymore, so I never get the urge to do it. And I also help people still with who have addiction, who have addictions in my daily job, in my life, you know.
That helps remind you.
Yeah.
Helping people go through what you went through.
And sometimes, if appropriate, I do share that with them. I do share that with clients that are struggling, because I want them to gather hope. I'm hoping that they gather hope for me for sharing my story.
Yeah.
You know?
And to see that it's possible.
Yeah. And it's possible to be a productive member of society after you've been that low before.
You know what my brother said to me? So my brother is an addict, an alcoholic, who's currently in prison. And he said to me, I told him I quit drinking in September. And he was like, oh, so you're going to be boring then. And then when he talks about, he has been, obviously he can't have alcohol unless you make hooch in a toilet in prison. And but he's actually been trying really hard not to get in trouble and do well in there.
That's awesome.
And he said to me, well, I guess I'm going to be boring now. And I said, bro, it is not boring. Like,
Never.
it is different. It's a different kind of fun.
Yeah.
But it's not boring.
Do you remember me when I was clean and sober?
Yeah, you were a riot. You are way more fun. You are way more fun than I am sober. I'll say that for you. Like, we'd be at the bar, I'd be drinking, and she'd be out there like dancing, getting it. And I'd be like, I didn't even have as much energy as you had.
And I didn't have hangovers.
What's funny though to me, like, I've been not drinking for like 7 months, and I wouldn't say that I was an alcoholic, but I could definitely see myself having alcoholic tendencies. And the more I drank, the more I wanted to drink. And I'll still, like, 7 months in, there'll be times where I'll be like, well, I could. And then I'm like, no, you came this far. And you don't even miss it. Why do that to yourself?
Right. That little thing in your brain.
Yeah, and I think that for a lot of people, they will have that little whisper, like, well, you could. And I think in those moments, it's important to just remind yourself, like, look how far I've come. Like, I don't have to do that. Right. My life is better without it.
So, fun fact, I will tell you this because I want to just tell in a story time again, just quickly. But when I was doing Narcotics Anonymous, I was like 6 years clean at that point. Well, like everything, you know, and did the work and all that stuff. I talked to one of my friends in the program, and I asked her, and I said, I think I want to start drinking alcohol again. And she's like, okay, tell me more about that. And so we would talk about it, and I would write about it. And she said, you know, like, it was cool how supportive she was, because she's like, you know, I certainly wouldn't do that, honey, but if you want to go ahead and try, you know, we'll be here for you if you need it. And so, like, when I relapsed, I guess you could call it.
You made a conscious decision to attempt a different substance.
Yes, I did. I made a conscious decision to, you know, I thought about it, and I prayed about it, and I did the work about it, and I was like, I think I have enough tools in my toolbox, and I think I've mended as much trauma as I could at that point to not let the addiction take over. And so when I made the conscious decision to start drinking again, it was definitely in moderation, because I had been 6 years. Could you imagine drinking after 6 years? Like,
I would be ill.
Yeah, it was, I think, my first time I drank, I only had like 1 glass of wine, you know, and that was it, you know, so it was like built the tolerance. But now that I still drink, I manage, you know, it's funny because the alcohol did not take me down, but all throughout this process, you know, I've been drinking again since 2014, so 10 years. And all throughout this process, you know, the humility is still there. Like, you know, you could go there. You know, you could be that. And there's been times in my life where I, you know, probably drank a little too much than I needed to, but I still maintained, you know, like, I'm a mom, I'm a single mom, you know, I have a career job, you know, so I kept all that up, and that's what helped me. And now I drink like 1 time a week. You know, it's not.
I think knowing knowing who you are is important.
Yeah, like she said, alcohol and substance use is just a fucking band-aid. And if we can deal with the stuff in here and here, then it's not going to have to be a band-aid anymore. It's not going to
You
have to
won't
be
need
that
that
coping skill.
mechanism anymore.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know. I kind of was preachy in this episode, I guess, but I hope
I don't
that
think so.
I hope that if you listen to this episode and you're struggling with addiction of any kinds, I really hope that something spoke to you today, because you know, I care about everybody who is struggling with addiction, and there's a better fucking life, man. Like, I promise there's a better fucking life. I'm even willing to go so far as, if you want to private message us, if you need somebody to talk to, Holly is a health coach. I'm a social worker, but I'm still, you know, I know about addiction personally and professionally.
She has the education.
So, you know, I'm happy to help walk you through that process. We are happy to help walk you through that process if this is the first step that you need to take.
Yeah, if you need a little extra support.
Yeah.
We're here. That was a heavy one, but
yeah,
thank you for listening.
But thank you so much. And keep trucking, guys. We're
trying.
all work in progress.
Yeah, keep trying.
All right.
Love you.
Love you. Thank you, friends.